Here we are in Indianapolis, speaking to the owner of Hero House.
Hello, my name is Mike Rittenhouse, and I am the owner of Hero House Comics.
So, Mike, we've known you for some years. You're a band member in 5-Year Missions. We know you're a Star Trek fan, and obviously owning this awesome comic book store. You're a comic book fan. Give us an idea where you grew up and how you got into fandom.
Well, I grew up here in Indiana, kind of in a rural area of the state. I moved to Indianapolis about 15 years ago. Living out in the middle of nowhere, I didn't really have a lot to do, so I really got into comics and sci-fi and stuff like that. I grew up very much into Star Wars as a little kid, and as I got older in my teenage years and as a young adult, I got way more into Star Trek. It just appealed more to me. I just kind of grew up as a fan of this kind of culture.
Growing up with comic books, how much of an impact did it make on your life, the physical medium of comics?
Well, again, living in the middle of nowhere, I didn't have a lot to do, so my mom would, every time she went to the grocery store, she'd buy me a comic of some sort, and I would read them, and it made me want to draw. I used to draw a lot of things, made comics with a friend in high school and after that, and that's kind of what got me into the comic industry, sort of. Back then, I never thought that I would actually own a comic book store, but, it just kind of turned out that way.
Marvel or DC, which one did you lean towards when you were younger?
Probably Marvel. I really liked the Superman movies as a kid.
We all did. They were iconic.
Yeah. But as far as like the cartoons and the comics, definitely like Spider-Man and those kinds of characters a lot more. They just seem more human and less godlike. The DC characters always seem a little far out of reach,
So let's talk about your love of comics and within time, how all of our tastes change and develop. As you started growing older, at what point did you say, this is a medium that I can actually love it enough to make a business out of it?
Well, when I was younger, like I said, I made comics with a friend, and there was a time when I thought maybe I would be like an artist and create comics. After I gave up on that and got more into music and that sort of thing, through music, I met a friend of mine named Wayne, and he was looking to open a comic book store, so we opened one together, and then kind of brought my love of comics back because I'd kind of lost it for a little while, and then now I'm definitely obviously a huge appreciator of comic books.
You mentioned music. Tell us about your music career.
I've been a musician pretty much my whole life. My dad was always a musician, and his dad was one, so it runs in the family, and I've always been in bands ever since junior high, and like I said, I got really into Star Trek as a young adult, so at one point I decided to combine the two loves, Star Trek and music, and I started 5-Year Mission, which was at the time supposed to be just kind of a little side project that my friend Noah and I were going to do, where we just wrote songs about Star Trek, and here we are almost 10 years later, and we play all over the place. Like, we have fans all around the world, and it's kind of crazy.
Tell us about some of your unique experiences with 5-Year Mission.
Well, at this point, we've been able to meet pretty much all of the actors and creators of all of the series. It's people I never thought that I would ever meet. And we've opened for several of them at different events. William Shatner, and Will Wheaton, and a few other people. And probably the most amazing thing that we've done is we got to be the house band at Star Trek Las Vegas for the 50th anniversary of Star Trek. And so we spent the whole weekend on stage with all of the guests and celebrities, playing them on and off. It was pretty awesome.
That's the first time I ever heard of you. And I remember watching online saying, what a great idea.
Yeah. Because
you're in full costume and you have themes to your songs.
Yeah, we dress in the original series uniforms, and all of our songs are about episodes of the original series. Our initial goal is to write a song for each episode, and we're actually working on the last batch now. We have 4 albums of songs. Well, technically we have 6, but yeah, we have one more album to go before we're finished with the original series, and then we'll move on to do other Star Trek stuff after that.
So let's talk about comics. What about from the Golden Age all the way up to the, sometimes people call it Copper Age, or things from the 90s? That's what a lot of our listeners listen to on our podcast, things of yesteryear, with a specific focus of the 70s and 80s. We're looking around your store right now, and we're seeing a surge of interest of that era particularly. Even the comic book companies see a need to reprint those issues. Why do you think that is?
I think that that's when the comic book industry really took a turn, and a lot of the stories became a lot more serious and a little bit more longevity to them. If you go back to the 60s and before that, most comic books were just one-shots. They were just one-off stories where, there's a bank robber and Spider-Man stops the bank robber or whatever. Lex Luthor's got some machine, he's going to take over the world, and Superman stops him. And, in the 70s, it really started to change, and the stories started to last longer and become 2 or 3 issues long, or they would start having overarching stories that would last for a year, and then by the 80s they got to the point where every story would be at least 4 or 5 issues long, and it just became a lot more involved, and a lot of it became a lot more mature, a lot more aimed for adults, because the kids who read the comics in the 50s and 60s were adults in the 70s and 80s, and so they were writing stories for the same people, and they just became a lot more intense and less aimed at young readers.
Mm-hmm. And we grew up in that era that we just accepted it. We latched onto it, knowing that, wow, these are sequential issues. I have to keep buying more. It became almost an addiction to a point.
Yeah, that's certainly how I was for a while. As a kid, every time I read an issue, I'd want to get the next one.
So let's talk about your store and how awesome it is. I mean, you have a little bit of everything here. You have new things, retro things, you have T-shirts, tons of back issues. Give our listeners a virtual tour of why this is the spot to go to when they're visiting Indianapolis.
Well, yeah, like you said, we're in Indianapolis. We're in a neighborhood called Fountain Square. We have a lot of everything from comics and pop culture, but as far as Indianapolis goes, we have a pretty huge selection of back issues, everything from gold to modern, a lot of silver and Bronze Age books, which, like you said, are kind of becoming the popular thing now. And I think there's one other store in town that has a larger selection of back issues, and so we've got one of the biggest ones in the area. But we do carry a lot of new items. We have pretty much all of the new comics that come out. We have statues and shirts and action figures. We have a lot of retro stuff. I got a whole shelf full of Star Trek novels. We've got pop figures, and of course I carry the comic supplies for storing your collection, boxes and bags and boards. Pretty much anything that the average collector would need or be looking for.
Anybody of notoriety come into the store?
I've had a few celebrities stop by over the years. One notable one was John Spencer from the John Spencer Blues Explosion. He stopped by one day when they were playing here in the neighborhood and bought several comics. And then at the end, he asked if I would be interested in, or he saw the 5-Year Mission CDs on the counter and was curious about them and asked if I'd be willing to trade for his band's CD. And I said sure. And then he came back a few minutes later and gave me a couple of his CDs to trade for the 5-Year Mission ones. And I actually didn't realize who he was until he handed me the CDs. And then I was like, oh, wow. Like, I didn't realize that, you were someone that I have, listened to on, the radio and, heard of many years ago.
What's your number one pet peeve as a store owner? What should people coming into a comic store never do?
Don't walk in the door and immediately say, I'm just browsing.
That's a random weird thing. I've never said that. I've never had a desire to say that. So that does happen?
Or the other one I get that's really annoying is when someone walks in and I'll say, hello, how are you doing today? And they'll immediately say something like, I don't have any money. Like, I'm just here to look. I'm waiting for a friend. Like, okay, that's nice. You know.
I didn't ask that.
Yeah. Like they're terrified that I'm going to try to sell them something.
All right. What should people coming to your store should they do?
Buy as many things as you can afford to. No, just be cool. Come in. Let's talk about comics and sci-fi and whatever. I mean, I'm not just after your money. I'm here to make friends and meet cool people.
Yeah, it has the feel like a community, like it's a really cool place to come into and just talk about comics. And obviously you're a huge comic fan. We've known you for years. And so it's not just you ring up an order and leave. It has that down-to-earth feel here.
Yeah, I mean, I spend all day long here. I mean, this is, I do have a home, but this is basically my home. I'm here probably more than I am there. And so, people who come in here, I've got a lot of people who come in here that they're not customers, they're my friends. I mean, even though I met them because the first time they came in, they were looking to buy something, but, now we go to each other's houses and have game nights, and they come see my band play, and, I know their families and their kids' names and everything. It's like, it's sort of, yeah, like you said, sort of a community. Like, this is my hub for my life. So, I'm not just some guy ringing up the cash register.
Now it's called the Hero House. Where did that name develop?
Well, like I said earlier, a friend of mine, Wayne, and I started the store originally. He still shops here. He's still a customer and a friend of mine, but he split about 7 or 8 years ago, and so it's been just me since then. But he came up with the name, and he used to have another comic store in his hometown in Ohio that was next door to a sandwich shop called the Hero House, and he always thought, well, that would be a great name for a comic book store. And so when he opened another store with me here in Indianapolis, he decided to call it that.
I would never guess that. So do you plan on expanding and offering hero sandwiches?
If I offered sandwiches, and especially if I offered some kind of alcoholic beverages in this neighborhood, I would probably make a lot more money than selling comic books.
You can sell alcohol anywhere, and you will always make more money. Yes, that is true. I'm going to tell you what I like. Number one, you have everything bagged and boarded, and they're organized. If you want to drive me absolutely crazy, have a random organization system or have obviously haphazardly care about your comics. I will be in your store for about 4 minutes, and I will make it a point. Is there anything I can find for you? Yeah, how about some organization? Yeah, I'm not playing that game. So I love how organized it is.
Yeah, one of the things I decided immediately when we were planning to open the store is that this was not going to be one of those stores that was just a mess and things, you couldn't find anything. I am a big fan of organization. I'm a little OCD about it. So, yeah, my comics are always going to be in order. I try to keep everything in its place. One of the other things I really appreciate about our store is that I knew that I would always want to have like discount books. Like, back when I was a kid, comic book stores always had quarter comics. You could buy a comic for a quarter, and then we opened up, and we've always had quarter comics, and we also have dollar comics. So. And it's a pretty good selection as well. It's not just the stuff that got, ran over and, is falling apart. There's some good stuff in there that's usually it's just books that I have so many copies of that I don't need anymore. So
you share the love.
Yeah. So, instead of hoarding them, I'll just put them in the discount books and let people get them, and maybe that will spark their interest and they'll buy more copies of the other issues,
Another thing I enjoy about a store like yours is that as I'm perusing the place, I'm seeing curiosities, and I'm just realizing this floor. What is the deal with the floor?
Well, Wayne is an artist. He's done several pieces around town, and he also has done a comic strip for many years called Barfly. So when we opened the store, he painted a lot of the store in what he calls something with Jack Kirby's name.
It looks like Kirby-esque artwork. You can tell the influence.
Yeah, it's like circuitry and things like that. The stuff that Kirby would draw, like in the background of Fantastic Four issues. But he drew that, or he painted it kind of all over. He painted the floor, and some of the fixtures have it on them, and so. I've kind of just kept that style all these years. In fact, a couple times when I built a new fixture, I would invite Wayne to come in and paint it so that it would continue to match the rest of the store.
It's fantastic. I mean, it's really a work of art just coming in here. The signage is unique, and it's a feast for the eyes. So let's just look through some of the comics. Any back issues that highlight for you? Any special fond memories? Because you go deep, so I'm having some amazing memories going through your back issues.
I try to keep a little bit of everything in there. Try not to be too biased with my books. Everything has a fan, and so basically when I get a collection in, I just try to put the best stuff in the back issues, and anything that's in really low grade, or like I said, that I have a lot of copies of, I'll just put in my discount books. But I can't really play favorites with the comics. They're all special.
That's awesome. Do you do mail order? Because any of our listeners check our show notes and order some things from you?
Sure. I actually have a few customers that used to live in town, and when they moved out of town, they stayed with me, and I just mail them their books monthly or every so often, and they just pay, through a credit card or whatever.
Oh, that's great. So especially those live in rural areas as well, you deal with them.
Sure. Yeah. I'm happy to service anyone that's wants to shop here, even if they don't live here.
So in closing, where can we find you, and what can we look forward to in the future from the Hero House?
Well, most likely you'll find me here at the Hero House. What's
your website?
Yeah, on Hero House doesn't have a website, but we're on Facebook and Twitter, and you can find me on also on Facebook and Twitter. On Twitter, it's Classic Rittenhouse. And, of course, you can find 5 Year Mission also, 5yearmission.net. Hero House is located at 1112 Prospect Street in Indianapolis, Indiana. Come visit me, and I'll hook you up with some cool stuff.
Thanks for listening. Make sure you hit that subscribe button and join our Facebook group. Live long, and may the force be with you. Nanu Nanu.